Hey, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be going over the 5 core principles of public speaking. This also does apply to charisma and conversation, so I would advise you watch it anyhow. Alright, addressing the first biggest piece of cope you will ever hear. Public speaking isn't even important, bro. I can say 1,000 things about this, but I'm just going to say, look at the studies. Hundreds of studies have been done about people who are better than just average at public speaking. You can say they score higher paying jobs. They secure better salaries. They get the promotion, even if they weren't as qualified as someone else. It's because they could express their need for it, their desire for it. They attract higher quality people, and they're just better to talk to. Those are all attributes we want to be hitting. So, this little piece of code, we can firmly eradicate. Don't even consider it. Now, back to the core principles. We have these 5 right here. Inflections, pauses, diction, confidence, and gestures. They kind of go hand in hand, and they're still very separate. But it's public speaking, there's about 1,000 other little principles that are there. They're not as important as these 5. The latest principle and all that other nonsense. So, we're going to be starting with pauses, one of the most important. And they're all important. So, we pause to allow the audience time to digest, and it also builds suspense and interest when done correctly. Also, in human conversation, not really like now, we can use pauses to show that we're really thinking and to provide a more valuable response. They also show that you have a confidence, you have this calmness inside of you, which is very desirable, especially for an audience observing a speaker. Don't worry, don't fret about pauses. They are truly amazing once you get them down right. So what do these numbers mean? Whenever you make a pause, before or after a sentence, maybe even during, you need to count to 1 to 3. Some sentences, some pauses will require a longer beat. So it's a 1 beat, a 2 beat, and a 3 beat. In a quick little one-liner, you might just have the 1 beat. You might say one little line, like, my favorite activity is cricket. Something like that. Or 2 beats, which is the same process, but 1, 2. And then for 3 beats, a longer pause, which builds more tension, more suspense, is more valuable. So, in one of my first speeches, I had, an alright introduction, but then I began with, I remember when I was just about 6, and I read my very first book on imagine. That's how it went. You use these longer beats when you're trying to build suspense or when you've made a really important statement. 2 to 3 for the important statements, 1 to 2 for lesser important sentences and statistics usually. But yes, pauses, how do we incorporate them? Well, it's just as follows. If you think something needs a pause, probably needs a pause. After most statistics, numbers, or really important information, it's best to pause and give the audience time to really realize the true extent of it. So that concludes pauses, and now we're off to inflections. I did kind of place it in a hierarchy of what I think is the most important, and there's a reason why inflections are at the top. So, busting out the drawing tool this time. This is what normal inflections look like. This is what, if, now, you know when you're talking is like the little up and down thing, like wavelengths? Most people talk like that. Very small difference, it's almost a straight line. And that's called a monotone. There is nothing more boring than a monotone, like this, when you're speaking. That's the last thing we want. What we want is this. We want inflections. This is what inflections are at heart. They're all about changing the tone to reflect what's wanted, what emotion you're conveying. So you see, I might go up if it's something light-hearted, if it's something really encouraging, if it's something inspiring. But if it's dark, it's gloomy, I'll bring my voice down, not quite to a monotone, but just darker pitches. And I might go back up because it got really happy. That's how your monotone works. Even in everyday life, strive for this little gimmick because it is so much more valuable. You can use the monotone when you're feeling lazy, and I advise don't use it at all. Always strive for the most amount of inflections that make reasonable sense. You don't need to be screaming up and down, up and down. That's just annoying. So, in public speaking, why would we use the tone of our voice? Well, like I just said, to reflect what is desired. If you give a statistic that is brutally upsetting, like this, there is a statistic I had in my first speech that every single hour 11,000 sharks are killed. You can see your 1 to 3 pause of the inflections. I've gone down because it's serious, because it's dark. Now I can go right back up because it's a joke. What was it? I was stupid. Each year sharks bite approximately 50 people. But in New York, New Yorkers bite 160 fellow New Yorkers. Crazy, right? But you can see the inflection will go up there, but it'll go down once it gets serious. And it definitely affected you. I know for a fact, because my tone depicted that. Facial expressions also followed suit, and it's really a double whammy. Right, if you can get your facial expressions to do your tone, it'll be about 90% of the tone. But if you can get both, if you can get your facial expressions and your voice range, your inflection to match with what you're saying, it's so convincing. It's so effective when you speak. Now we're going over to the third one, diction. I've been slaughtering my diction recently, and I'm sorry, guys. But yes, bad diction. I mean, it's just really the pronunciation of words, right? That's the best way to summarize it. Bad diction. Why is my text like that? Bad diction is horrendous. It's like when you talk like this, you garble your words. No one can hear what you're saying. It's very difficult to interpret, and especially if you're public speaking, this is when your diction will fail. It's when you'll stutter, it's when you'll fumble. So I've tried my best with my diction right here, because otherwise my mentor will be really upset with me, but also so it actually makes sense for you. That's one of the things I'm striving for, is my diction. It's once you get your inflections and your pauses right, it's second nature. But your diction, even just then when I said nature instead of nature, it fumbles constantly, and you need to be on the lookout for it. Pauses help tremendously. If you can cool your brain, just relax it, and let it think and iron out what you're going to say, your diction will naturally rise. Your diction gets worse when you start stumbling and scrambling, looking for a word. Also happens when you're rambling. So, we need to aim for good diction so people actually know what we're talking about. Because, everyone understands good diction. However, what I found is if you really overpronounce your words, if you really focus on stressing each vowel, each consonant, it can help tremendously. Also, explosive P's, T's, B's. Whenever you say B, explode. Like, think of like a bomb when you say B, like bomb. Really loudly burst of air. And it helps a lot with saying it. Now we're going on to confidence. I'm going to be super honest right now. Confidence is solely separate to public speaking and charisma. You need to fix your confidence before you can fully unlock your public speaking potential and your charismatic potential. So, how do we fix confidence? Like your addictions and stuff, where you build like self-worth and self-establishment and proud accomplishments of who you are. You don't start with confidence. Very few people do. You get confidence by achieving things. Confidence is competence. Confidence is a reflection of self-certainty within yourself that you get only by achieving amazing accomplishments. The reason I'm confident here right now is because I've been a finalist for multiple public speaking competitions. I've become school captain. I've done all these little things, right? And I understand that I've slowly built up my confidence. I know the dark side of this tunnel, so do not play coy. You just need to start doing stuff that makes you proud of you. Because then you're fine with showing yourself off. You can build that. Of course, I'm not your therapist. I'm not your dad. You do you. Gestures. Cannot say this enough. They add to the point. They are not the whole point. Unless you're talking about gestures specifically. Even then, your hand gestures are not the point. Your words are. Gestures still hold tremendous value. I'm going to be honest, they are sensational. The whole sub-branch of body language, eye contact, all that nonsense, I chose gestures alone because they're the most important to me. I'm naturally an alright speaker. I'm slightly confident in myself. I think you can call that arrogance, but I naturally use gestures. If you think about it logically, we would love to see people with their hands around them. They go like this. Not just because they're like kung fu fighting or whatever, but because of how our brains developed. Think back to the cavemen. They didn't have speech. They were probably just saying this rock or wheel, like one words. One word is really one word. But when we look at this now, they communicated through a systems of dancing, of signals. That's why we have, okay, not okay, rendezvous, all these little gang signs type of things. Gestures are like that, and we've evolved to interpret gestures and hand signs. So, we need to utilize them to our best advantage. When you're speaking, it's not just your voice, not just your face, it's your whole body on portrayal. So interpret the idea of the power sphere, which is a very, what's the word? It's a very strange thing. I actually don't know that much about it. It's from your eyes to your belly button. That's the range you want your hand gestures to be. You don't want hands down here unless it's proving a point. This range is like the golden point of your gestures. Somewhere in here is amazing. Of course, they add to the point. So don't flail your hands around. You don't want to basically be throwing hands to people from across the stage. You just want your gestures to add to it. I notice that when I'm recording a lot, I actually throw my hands around because it's the only way I can really talk to people because there's no eye contact. So I naturally do it more. But in-person conversations, sometimes my hands are just like this. And it's kind of lame, I'm going to be honest. Gestures are crucial to the way you present yourself and the way you present your speech. Good gestures separate you from somebody who has everything else done right. If both of you have all of these things done to pitch perfect, down to a T, and only one of you uses gestures, the person with the gestures is going to be better. Same works with the literal other 5 principles. You can have these 4, but one person has inflections, other person has a monotone. Person with inflections sounds 1,000 times better, and it works for all of them. That's why I've called them the core principles. So how do we practice? Literally, grab your phone, record yourself speaking. Either get your own speech, just ask AI to make one, and as you do it, focus on your inflections, going up where it's lighthearted and going down when it's serious. Utilizing your pauses whenever you can, and using your diction to perfectly portray and illustrate each word you want to say. Now your confidence will be pretty low on the first time with the camera, but it will also build your confidence over time because you're literally recording yourself doing this. Confidence is accomplishments and competence. And it's an accomplishment that you're practicing this, so good on you. And gestures, just hone those ones in. If you gesture too much, It's a distraction. If you don't do it at all, it's simply waste of potential. That does conclude today's little lecture or lesson, whatever you want to call it. And I've got nothing else to say. See you in the next one, and keep practicing your speeches. See ya.